everybody to the 101 podcast by Serena Organics, where we provide accurate and reliable information on cannabidiol, also known as CBD. Throughout this series, we'll be speaking with a number of leaders within the CBD industry. Reason being is to help share their information and knowledge to help educate our audience. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. She has a son called Alfie. Alfie suffered from epilepsy from a very young age. She actually moved her family over to Holland to help treat Alfie's epileptic fits using CBD via medicinal cannabis. And she was actually one of the pioneers to actually get medicinal cannabis first used within the UK. Meeting the then Prime Minister Theresa May to help push that through Parliament. Really excited to sit down and find out more about Alfie's story from our guest speaker today, which is Hannah Deacon. Hannah, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hannah is a campaigner and head of patient at a company called Life Group. She has been working with medicinal cannabis for the past few years now, helping to drive the actual use of CBD and medicinal cannabis for patients who can benefit with health problems. Hannah, could you start off by telling us how you got into your current role and into the medicinal cannabis industry in the first place?
Yeah, of course. I would mainly call myself a medical cannabis campaigner because that's basically, I spend most of my time doing that. So I have a son, Alfie, 8 months old. Up until he was 8 months old, he was fine, and at 8 months old, he had his first seizure, which was incredibly frightening. I've never seen anyone have a seizure in my life. Everyone in our family is very well. There's no epilepsy or anything. So it was a big shock. It happened in the night. So I woke up to hear him screaming. I ran into his room and he was having a huge tonic-clonic seizure, which is where your arms and legs and everything go, and he was going blue, he wasn't breathing. So it was incredibly frightening, and he was very, very hot. So as soon as the seizure stopped, it only lasted for about a minute. We picked him up and put him in the car and took him straight to A&E. And we were told that he probably had a febrile convulsion and not to worry about it because he had such a high temperature, but it was very quickly obvious that he was very seriously ill. He was started to have pretty much back-to-back tonic-clonic seizures in A&E. And we were rushed onto the children's ward where he was, and this is our local hospital, so it's a small, town hospital. It's not a big intensive care unit or anything like that. Yeah. We basically spent 24 hours in this hospital where they were just following the epilepsy protocol and pumping him full of drugs, and he was just getting worse and worse. And by the end of that day, they had to, bring a crash team because they thought he was going to die. Basically, it was really incredibly traumatic. And he was put in on a life support machine, and we were transferred to an intensive care unit, initially to Stoke Hospital, where unfortunately they couldn't help him. There was no neurologist there. It was not very good, unfortunately. And after a lot of insisting, we moved to Great Ormond Street Hospital, where they were very, very good, and they did lots of tests on him, and they stopped his seizures using methylprednisolone, which is an intravenous steroid. And we were sent home, but he'd been seizing on a life support machine for 3.5 weeks, so we had to rehabilitate him. We had to get him off a lot of drugs. He was on morphine, he was on 9 anti-epileptics at that time. They didn't work for him. He was diagnosed with immune responsive epilepsy at the time. All his genetic panel was normal, all the other tests were normal, so they just said, because he's responded to steroids, we think it's an immune system failure, basically, and we think it might be isolated, so we were sent home. He lost his ability to swallow, to sit, to move. I mean, he was like a newborn baby again because he'd been so seriously ill, and we weaned him off all the awful drugs that he'd been put on, and then that didn't work. And then 8 months later, it happened again, and it happened in a cyclical nature. So we would rehabilitate him, and then bang, these clusters of seizures would come again, and that happened till he was 4. And then age 4, they started to come every 3 weeks, and then by the age of 5, it was every week. So by the age of 5, I was taking him into our local hospital in an ambulance, pumping him full of steroids and other drugs, and then bringing him home, having 3 or 4 days where he would beat me up and hurt me, and it was awful. It was horrible to even think about it. And we were just going round and round in this vicious circle. And doctors were saying to us, it's incredibly dangerous to give him the amount of steroids he's having, because they can cause organ failure, brittle bones, mental health disorders, schizophrenia. They can really mess with you. And he was having up to 25 doses of high-dose methylprednisolone every month. So his quality of life was nothing, and our quality of lives were nothing. And I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was, people get PTSD after one traumatic event. I was living, my partner and my daughter and my whole family were living a traumatic event every week. I mean, it was no wonder, we were in terrible state. And in 2016, I really felt, personally, I didn't want to live. I didn't want to watch my child suffer the way he was. I didn't want to have to, there was not any support either, other than the local hospital, who were amazing, and the nurses were brilliant. I had no mental health support. I had no social worker. I had no respite. I had nothing. We had nothing as a family. And that's something that really, really was very detrimental to my mental health, to my partner's mental health, is that we felt there was no break. It was just intensive pain and suffering for all of us all the time. And in 2016, I just didn't want to carry on like that. And I think that was, for me, a pivotal moment in my decision to fight and to decide, actually, I won't accept this, because I believe that our human bodies want to be well. Our bodies are amazing, and they want to be well, and they get damaged, but they always want to be well. And I just thought, we're firefighting at the moment. All we're doing is treating symptoms. We're not actually looking at the root cause of his problem. We're not trying to find out what's wrong. And that's Western medicine is like that. It's basically a symptom suppressor. No one seemed to want to know what was wrong with Alfie. We did get a diagnosis when he was 5 of a condition called PCDH19, which for us is a non-inherited genetic condition, so I don't have it, nor does my partner. So they call it a spontaneous reproduction, so it was probably something that went wrong in the womb. And it basically consists of clustering epilepsy, so seizures that come in clusters, and mild to severe learning delay and behaviour problems. The reason Alfie hadn't been tested for it is it only affects girls usually, so it's on the X chromosome. So in boys, they have it, but they're non-symptomatic. But because Alfie is something called mosaicism, which means he has some mutated genes, but not all, it means he has very severe epilepsy, and the condition is very severe for him. And I think at the moment there's about 9 diagnosed boys in the world with his condition, so very rare. So when we found that out, I just thought, well, I know more than they do. I'm his mum, and I've lived with this for 5 years, and no one knows about PCDH19. There is some research in America, but I just thought, well, I'm his expert, and actually what do I see? I see an epilepsy that responds to steroids. Well, what do steroids do? They suppress your immune response. Well, is there something that could naturally do that isn't going to kill him, basically, or severely, give him very poor outcome, life outcome, basically, because it wasn't the seizures that I was worried about necessarily, it was all the drugs that were being pumped into him, which we didn't really understand how were going to affect him long term. So I just did lots of research when I felt so low, and I just thought, I can't carry on. I thought, well, I've got to fight, and cannabis kept coming up as an epileptic treatment, and I was really shocked at that, because I knew cannabis as, at college, where people smoke joints and get stoned and laugh and eat too much. I didn't think it was a medicine, so I was sort of quite dismissive of it. I'll be very honest, probably quite judgmental, so as many people are, and I thought, well, that's not medicine, that's a drug that gets you high and it's fun. But actually, when I started to do lots of research, and I watched some YouTube videos with Professor David Nutt talking about the endocannabinoid system, and I realised, this was actually a thing. We had a system that needed cannabis for some people that are deplete, and the entourage effect. And I sort of immersed myself in learning so I could really be empowered when I was talking to Alfie's clinicians, so I didn't feel stupid. I wanted to be, on top of my game when I was trying to talk about my son's health. And so I thought, well, this has to be something that we try. And also I joined lots of social media groups. There's loads of really good epilepsy CBD groups on Facebook, for example. And I just thought, these people can't all be wrong. The anecdote becomes fact if there's enough anecdotes, as far as I'm concerned. and there was thousands of anecdotes where children's seizures were reduced, or they stopped, or their quality of life had improved, or when they had seizures they got over them quicker. So I thought, well, this has to be something I try. And really what drove me is that if my son dies, I have to know that I've done everything as his mother to keep him alive, because that's a really horrible thing to have to face one day, and I need to know, because I'll feel that guilt anyway, I need to know that I've tried to do everything for him. So that's what drove me. And I went to talk to Alfie's doctors about it, and they said there's an Epidiolex trial, which is a CBD isolate. I think it has some THCV in, but it's highly pharmaceuticalized. It has ethanol and flavouring, and it's as probably far removed from the cannabis plant as you can get. But we said, fine, we'll try for the trial, and Alfie was refused because he didn't have the conditions that they were trialling, so fine. And then I said, well, what about trying medical cannabis abroad? And he, our clinician, said to me at the time, and my relationship with him wasn't great, and he said, if you talk to me again about using cannabis with your child, I'll report you to social services.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, so I can't get a social worker to help me, but you'll report me for damaging my child, and all I'm trying to do is save his life, basically, because he was in hospital every week. So we were very lucky to have a local consultant who actually was brilliant and always listened to us as his parents. And I spoke to him about this, and he was just like, that's just disgraceful, we'll refer you to a different consultant. And we moved hospitals to a brilliant consultant who got us in the hospital for a month and tried to stop Alfie's clustering without using steroids, because that was the big problem for him, and he just didn't respond to anything. He ended up in intensive care when we tried anything else. So I spoke to him, I sort of plucked the courage up, and I said, what about cannabis? And he was actually brilliant, and he said, well, if you go abroad and you try and it works, I'm happy to prescribe it for you, or try to. And I said, well, it's a Schedule 1 drug, you'd need to apply for a licence. And he was like, yeah. And he was really good, really supportive. And he actually talked to me about the fact that he'd done the same with his son, and he'd taken him abroad to use something. So he was really holistic and open to it. So I was like, fine. That was the beginning. That was sort of July 2017, and in that time we were already raising money to go abroad, and we had a Change.org petition to allow medical cannabis to be available in the NHS. But I just wanted that endorsement. I wanted a doctor to say, yes, you should go. And our MP was very supportive as well, and we had our local paediatrician and GP who were all on board. I wanted to do everything right. I didn't want ever to be open to criticism of putting my child at risk, because that's, I would never do that. So in September 2017, that's when we went to Holland, and we found a paediatric neurologist who was doing some small trial work with some children with refractory epilepsy, and we were lucky to get on that trial with her. And we met her in September 2017. It was very frightening to move somewhere. I didn't know how to speak the language. The four of us, my partner and my daughter, who was 3 at the time, came as well. We got a holiday park. That was the cheapest place we could live. And we were just like, right, okay, we're here, we're going to try it. And then we didn't have a plan. If it worked, we didn't have a plan, but I didn't care because I was doing something. And that gave me hope. We've talked before about hope, and hope is so powerful. It's what you need as a parent with a child with chronic illness, is hope. So yeah, she was amazing, this doctor, and she prescribed Bedrocan products called Bedrolite, which is a high CBD, low THC product. It's a full spectrum product, so if you look at it, it's dark, blacky green, it smells like cannabis, it's as close to the cannabis plant as you can get. It's a very good product. And we started that, and the first 6 weeks it did nothing. So, yeah. And I remember Alfie was in hospital still every week, and I would say the Dutch health was brilliant. We were very lucky because we had an E111, so all our emergency care was covered by us being in the EU. Again, why we went as well, because I thought, when we're out, if Brexit happens, I'm not going to have to go, because we couldn't afford to go to America or Canada. I mean, no way. We couldn't get insured, and we couldn't afford the money of taking Alfie into hospital every week, so that's why we went to Holland as well. And they were excellent with him, but he was still going to hospital every week. And I think sometimes at the beginning the seizures seemed to get worse, and I remember saying to the doctor, "My God, it's getting worse. Should we take him off the CBD?" I'm really panicking, and she's like, "Just be calm, just wait, because it takes time to work." And that's the one thing now that when I talk to families, is patience. It's so hard because cannabis takes time, especially with chronic illness like epilepsy. It takes time to build up on the receptors, and we learned that the hard way, having to watch our son for 6 weeks suffer. But once 6 weeks had passed and we got to 150 milligrams of CBD a day, he went 17 days and didn't have a seizure.
Wow, amazing.
And I was just like, this is a miracle, because he was only going between 5 and 8 days. So it more than doubled. And what we then noticed is when he did have a cluster, he had far less seizures. We needed 1 dose of steroids, not 5. And I think what's really clear is I've always hoped that I would cure my son. That's always been in my head. I want to cure my child. The reality is he has a genetic disorder. I'm not going to cure him. What I can do is give him the best quality of life using a medicine that helps him and doesn't give him side effects, and that's what we were seeing. I have to accept that he will always need rescue pharmaceuticals probably, but if we can reduce them and his quality of life is improved, then that's amazing. And that's what we were seeing, is that he needed less pharmaceuticals and he recovered quicker. And as we went on, the longest he went was 41 days with no seizures at all when we were in Holland, and it was amazing. So the doctor wrote this amazing report. And in February 2018, we just bit the bullet and we were like, we've got to go home. We've got to fight this from home. We can't fight it from The Hague. The government's not going to listen to us if we live in Holland. So we had to take the very difficult decision of taking Alfie off the medicine, because we didn't want to do anything illegal. So we took him off the medicine and came home, and within a few days of coming home, he was straight back in hospital having multiple seizures, which was really hard. But it was the right thing to do. What I did put him on a high CBD legal product, which did keep the wolf from the door a bit. So he was going into hospital every 10 days instead of every week. It did pushed it back a bit, but it was still really hard. And that's when we got in touch. We met End Our Pain through the all-party parliamentary group on drugs policy. Baroness Molly Meacham, my mum, got in touch with her while we were in Holland and sort of told her about our situation, and she put us in touch with End Our Pain, and that's where our campaign began.
Excellent.
Hannah, I just want to say thank you for not just sharing that story with myself, but with our audience as well. I know Alfie's got a very rare condition, but epilepsy is very common within the UK in particular. I think there's about 500,000 people who suffer from epilepsy, so really helpful for them to understand a bit more about how medicinal cannabis and CBD has helped treat your son, and how that could potentially be helpful for any of our listeners out there who may also be in a similar situation. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. First things first, and now, how's Alfie getting on now?
He's really good, yeah. He when we finally won our licence in June 2018 with the help of End Our Pain and Professor Mike Barnes, when he went back on the product, we bought the, I think it was the 7th of July, we bought the product into the UK legally for the first time.
Nice.
Which was amazing, into London City Airport with the importer, and that was an amazing experience. And he went back on the product and he had 11 months with no seizures, because we were getting it supported, we could up the dose, and once we upped the dose to he was on 300 milligrams of CBD a day, and that works out he was about 12 milligrams of THC a day, and he had 11 months with no seizures at all. Then we had some breakthrough seizures, and we've messed around with his dose. And he is also, to be very clear, he's on an anti-epileptic as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important, because I would never want people to listen to this and think, oh, cannabis is the only thing he's on. He's not. But when he was on 9 anti-epileptics before cannabis, he was still having seizures all the time. What I think that medical cannabis does, because he's on a low dose of anti-epileptic, is that it seems to help the anti-epileptic work in a better way. We did try and wean him off his anti-epileptic, and his seizures came back, so we know he needs an anti-epileptic with the medical cannabis, but he's on a very low dose. We don't see any side effects. His quality of life is excellent. He's now he hasn't had a seizure in over 4 months again. So, and when he does have a seizure, we can deal with it at home. So he may have 1 or 2 seizures. We'd give him 1 dose of steroids, orally steroids, and they stop. And then we may have to tinker around with his oil again, because obviously he's growing, and also we have to remember that your receptors get used to it, so sometimes you need to strain swap and things like that. That it's a very holistic medicine in that sense. Everyone's different, so that's what, one thing that I get frustrated with is again that you can't, as far as I'm concerned, you can't put a pharmaceutical framework around this medicine. You can't say you need 300 milligrams of CBD for epilepsy. It doesn't work like that. Some people are microdoses, some people need 20 milligrams, some people need 500 milligrams. Everyone is different. Everyone's endocannabinoid system is different. It's really quite painful as a parent when you've got an epileptic child. You just want it to work, but it doesn't work like that. You've got to go through the motions of going very slowly, building up and seeing what works for you. And it's very holistic, it's very individual. And that's why we need that framework to be different rather than trying to shoehorn a cannabis plant into a pharmaceutical framework. We need to say, okay, let's accept the exceptionality of it and create a framework that works for it, like an Office of Medical Cannabis, like we've seen in Holland and things like that. Like looking at other evidence, like anecdotal evidence, like observational data, because it's not a single compound pharmaceutical. And until that happens, I fear for people who need access to this, and that's why I carry on campaigning as I do, because it's not fair. If Alfie has it, then everyone else should.
Yeah, and it's amazing when you think about how far Alfie's come along.
Oh, amazing. He learnt to ride a bike, he goes to the RDA and rides horses. His conversational speech is amazing. He used to say 2 or 3 words before cannabis. Now he's, he has emotions. He's sad, he's happy, he plays with his sister, he's creating relationships, friendships. Nothing I'd ever seen before in him. Absolutely amazing. And it's because the seizures are stopped, so his brain has a chance to develop.
Yeah, exactly. And I think despite Alfie's age, he would have been fully aware of what's going on. And that is enough to knock anybody's confidence, especially when you're that age growing up.
I feel quite bad that I didn't really realise that he knew what was going on because of his mental, he's got learning difficulties and behaviour problems. I suppose as a baby he didn't really know what was going on, but I realised that he knew what was going on. I took him for a checkup to our local hospital to see the paediatrician, and he just freaked out, absolutely freaked out, floods of tears, no, and I was just like, oh my God, he knows exactly what's happened to him. And I felt really bad because I thought, how can I not realise, because actually inside of him is still a normal person with emotions, with feelings, with fear. He's been held down by 10 nurses before and had a needle put into him 20 times because they couldn't find a vein. You wouldn't have treated a dog the way he's been treated, and I'm not blaming them because that's all they could do. But what I do get very angry about is that the medical hierarchy are blocking this medicine that can change people's lives, and they're basically sentencing little children to go through that because they're being too narrow-minded about a medicine that could actually stop that, and that makes me very angry. Of the families like mine, because I know what they go through every day. I know the lack of the support they have. I know the lack of understanding they have and the lack of empathy. For God's sake, if there's a medicine that can stop all that, or at least mitigate some of that and help people stay at home, help mothers go back to work, because mostly it's mothers that are full-time carers. I was a full-time carer. I couldn't go out, I didn't have my friends, I couldn't see anyone because I was in an emotional torment. I completely detached myself from society. Why is it okay to allow that to happen? That's happening to thousands of families all across the country, and it's wrong. And medical cannabis, if made available to children with refractory epilepsy, could stop a lot of that, could give the mother a chance to go to work, to be her, not just be the carer to that child. And that's what drives me every day to carry on campaigning, because it's not just about medical cannabis, it's about the social impact on families of having children with refractory epilepsy or chronic conditions, and people don't talk about it enough, and people like that are not looked after enough as far as I'm concerned, and that has to change.
And I think the work you've been doing has been absolutely fantastic. And I hope that any of our listeners out there who are in a similar situation can help drive this this change you're trying to create within the medicinal cannabis space, particularly within the UK. I know for a lot of people out there who may be suffering in similar situations, who've tried all the epileptic medication, who've been on various number of steroids, and they've not seen any significant change from the medical route that they would expect. They feel like there is no hope out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes from as well is that families are frightened to question their doctors.
Yeah, of course.
Because they think their doctor knows everything. And I think what we have to remember is doctors are professionals, like we all are, and sometimes they get things wrong.
Of course.
And I used to get really angry that no doctor would ever say to me, I'm sorry, we don't know, or I'm sorry. I have got now, Alfie's neurologist is excellent and an amazing epilepsy nurse, and they're very good at saying sometimes we don't know, and that's fine. I've got a lot of respect for them because of that. But I've never, not many doctors are like that, and I think again it's this sort of arrogance. Oh, I'm a doctor, so if I don't know about it, then it doesn't exist. Well, that's nonsense because medical expertise is evolving all the time.
Exactly.
And I just don't see that. And I think a lot of families do struggle to sort of question their doctors sometimes. And I did. I had no confidence, but I've built confidence. And I realised actually I know my son better than anyone. I gave birth to him. I know him better than anyone. But I remember when I first had him, I thought, well, everyone knows better than me because I'm just a first-time mum. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I've realised that I do know what I'm talking about. And I want to try and empower people to feel confident to do that. I've set up a group. If you don't mind me just quickly mentioning it, another parent called Matt Hughes, called MedCan Support, catchy name, MedCan Support Parent Carers group, and basically it's for that. It's to empower people. We've got a website which is medcansupport.co.uk. So if there's any parents or carers listening who want to learn more about medical cannabis, who want to learn about how to talk to their doctors, who just want to feel empowered and confident when they're having those conversations, then go to the website. And we also have talks. We had a recent talk with Professor Mike Barnes on the endocannabinoid system. We've got a talk with Raphael Moshulam soon, which is exciting, who's a scientist from Israel who isolated THC for the first time in the 80s. So we're trying to get talks from doctors who are prescribing from all around the world as well, so people can learn. Because I think that's the way we change things, is education of parents, of carers, of doctors, of MPs. Many MPs I've spoken to really don't know what they're talking about when it comes to cannabis. So, yeah.
Exactly, Hannah, and that's why I'm really grateful for you coming on our show today to share your story, to not just help educate our audience, but help drive things forward, because I think it's an excellent cause. And I really want to reiterate that point you just highlighted. For anyone else who's going through a similar situation, they can help your cause on medcansupport.co.uk. Do reach out, have a look at the website, and see if you can help Hannah, because she is driving excellent things forwards. Hannah, in terms of when you came back to the UK with Alfie's Hope campaign, now obviously this is something that never actually been done before, particularly within medicinal cannabis. How was that for you? Because it's a path you very much had to create yourself with your own vision. So how was that for you?
I didn't know how to do it. I knew what I wanted to say. I knew that we wanted a prescription on the NHS. I knew that was a big task. I didn't know how to strategically make that happen. That's why we linked up with Endar Pain, which is a lobby group on medical cannabis on prescription. And I remember meeting Peter for the first time, and he just sort of said it's a roller coaster. There's lots of ups, there's lots of downs, and but I think I've never had any training or anything like that. I didn't need that. I'm just a mum who wants to go on media and push the government into helping me. So I went on BBC Breakfast the first time. I think it was February the 26th, 2018, and I remember the producer saying to me, Jilly, her name was, she was a really lovely lady, and she just said, this is your one chance. She said, just be open, just be honest, just give it your all. And I was incredibly nervous, but I just thought, she's absolutely right. And I just went on there, and I was really upset. I was really cross. I said I shouldn't have to be doing this. My son's really sick. I've proved that this medicine helps him in Holland for 5 months. This should be available in the UK. And I remember the quote from the Home Office, because obviously the Home Office were dealing with it. It wasn't a medical issue because it was a Schedule 1 drug, from Nick Hurd. And it said that there's no medicinal value to cannabis, and while we feel very sorry for this poor family, we're not helping you. So that was where we began, at the end of February. Then I was very lucky. Our MP was the Attorney General, not anymore, but very lucky because that's a very influential position. He got us a meeting with the Home Office at the beginning of March, and we went with him and my mum and my partner. And I just walked into this room and there was Nick Hurd and then all these officials, like head of drugs policy, lawyers, all that, and I was like, wow, it was a big table and it was really scary actually. And they sort of said, you can have Epidiolex. And I was like, well, I don't want Epidiolex. That we were refused a trial for it, so why now are we allowed it? That doesn't make sense to me. So, and actually I've proved that something else works for him. I want that. So they were gift wrapping Epidiolex for me. I was like, I don't care, I don't want it. I want a product that might work for my son. So they said, well, we could maybe think about doing a trial for you. But then we spoke to Professor Mike Barnes, and he said, and other doctors, and our local doctor said, you can't do a trial with one person who's already been on it. I mean, that's just nonsense. So the meeting didn't really get us anywhere. What I did do at the meeting is give them the report from our Dutch doctor, and I remember the official saying, oh, but she's Dutch. I was like, well, this is bad, this is not good. So we sort of went out of that meeting quite despondent, and then at the end of March we met with MPs. End Our Pain organised an event where we met MPs in London to talk about Alfie and talk about what we wanted to do, and we had about 120 MPs that came to that meeting, which was good. And then we handed in our petition, and because of the media we'd done, our petition then had about 380,000 signatures on it. And we went to number 10, handed the petition in, and that was the day we met Theresa May, the Prime Minister. So we were invited in, didn't realise it was going to happen. We were invited in with Sir Mike Penning, who was incredible. He's a big supporter of medical cannabis on prescription, and he managed to get us a meeting with Theresa May.
Amazing.
And I was having tea with Mike and Drew, and the kids were there. It was really bizarre. Like, Alfie was not having seizures obviously at the time, but he had just had seizures and he was a bit all over the place, and Annie was 3 and he was climbing on the sofas, and then Theresa May walked in. It's just very bizarre. But she said, I've heard about Alfie, I've seen the media that you've done, and we want to help you, and we will allow you to have to apply for a personal Schedule 1 licence for Alfie's doctors to prescribe, which has never been done before while it's been illegal. So that was an amazing step forward that she allowed that to happen. I think probably in hindsight she probably shouldn't have, but they wanted me to shush because the media was really interested in our story. So we did that, and then unfortunately our NHS consultant, who was very supportive and wanted to prescribe, as I said, was blocked from doing so by their internal medicines board. They said, you can't prescribe this, it's an unlicensed drug. So that's when we met Professor Mike Barnes, who was willing to do the licence application with the Home Office, which he spent 3 months doing amazingly well, with the support of our GP and our local paediatrician and another paediatrician, paediatric neurologist who provided governance. So we did that, and it was very difficult. And they did say to us, can you not do any media while we do this? So that's why, interesting. And at the time, we agreed, and I think it was silly of us to do that, really. But it was very difficult because if we'd have pushed too much the other way, and I like to think that actually, maybe naively, that if you work with people, even if they don't see eye to eye with you, if you can push them along and work with them and be, cooperating with each other, I'll give you this, you give me that sort of thing, that it would work. So I was like, okay, I won't do any media, but you do the licence and you make it happen quickly. And then it got to June 2018, and they just, to be fair to the Home Office, I think they were quite good. I think Mike would say they were quite good, but they did dilly-dally around because I don't think they really wanted to do it, and they didn't know what to do, really, and it was all very difficult. And we had a meeting with them and the doctors and our MP at Westminster, and that was on the Friday. And we agreed, the Home Office said, yeah, we've got everything we want, we'll give you a decision on Monday. And then on the Monday I got a phone call from the Chief of Staff, and he said, there's just a few things, and I just went nuts. And I was like, no, I've waited 3.5 months, my child's poorly, I'm not playing this game anymore, that's it, I'm done. And the next day I went on to the Today programme with John Humphreys, on Radio 4, and I just talked about my meeting with Theresa May, and I said, she looked me in the eye and she said she'd help me, and I said, I'm a mother of a child, this isn't political, and I feel like this is becoming a political football, and it's not political. This is my child, this is me, this is people's lives, and it's not good enough. And then the media just went, and I did loads of media that day, and then I got a phone call from Nick Hurd at about 11:30 that day, and he said, Hannah, I'm really sorry that it's been so difficult, but we're going to issue the licence today. And he said, today you and I have changed history. Whether he meant it or not, begrudgingly, I don't know, but it was a really nice little soundbite for me personally, for him to say, we did this together, and I was so proud, but I couldn't tell anyone, obviously. And then I went on to ITV Lunchtime News, and she said, we were just having a chat about it, and then the timings were wrong, and Sajid Javid came into the House of Commons as I was on air. She said, Sajid Javid's come into the House of Commons. He's just saying that Alfie Dingley's going to get his licence, and she told me live on TV. And I was like, oh my God. So it was just an amazing experience that I will never forget, and I'm so proud of doing that for my child. I would never have done it for me. I know that. But I would do anything for him. And it was an amazing experience. And then, as we know, the law changed on the 1st of November, and I felt, and there's other families that have done a lot of lobbying on this as well with epileptic children, and we should all feel incredibly proud of what we've achieved, respectively apart, but, all together in the same movement. We've all done amazing work. But really sad that there's not one new prescription since the law changed. And I felt really positive that this would change. But actually, if you dig deep down, there's a massive lobby against this because of, pharmaceuticals, and because of the fact that it's not a pharmaceutical, it's a plant, and that it's very, very, very complex. But for me, the most important thing out of all of this is people, and it's children like my son, and they are what matter here. Nothing else, as far as I'm concerned. And I might live in a naive little bubble, but I don't care, because actually I want the world to be a fairer, kinder place, and I want our country to be like that. And actually this should never be about money, this should never be about investors or whoever's making money or whatever. This is about people. This is about sick children, sick people, very hard situations for families, and we should be making their lives easier and better. And at the moment that's not happening. And, I feel very strongly about that, and that's why I do work every day as hard as I can to support families, to do the media, to do the lobbying, to push it, because it matters. It really matters.
Definitely, Hannah. And I think at the end of the day, people's lives matter, especially children's lives. And I hate to think that they're not getting access to treatment because of money or power play or politics. It just seems ridiculous to me. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we need to show compassion for one another. So if there is treatment available that can help people, then it should be made available to everyone.
I think that has been lost a lot in our society in lots of different ways, not just, you could talk about it in lots of different aspects, but I'll keep on the medical cannabis thing. But yeah, I completely agree with you. People that are sick matter more than anything. And if there is a medicine that can help, then yes, we regulate it. Yes, we need to do research. Yes, it needs to be safe, but it shouldn't be stopped. And what will happen if we push it down this pharmaceutical road of isolates, of trialling isolates, is that the black market will boom. And families like mine will be put under, scrutiny of arrest and of criminal charges of their children being taken from them, but also they'll be being given products that they have no idea what's in them. They're unsafe. They could make people worse. They can make seizures worse. We should not be, our government and the NHS hierarchy and all that should not be putting families and their loved ones in a position where they are criminalising themselves. It's absolutely disgraceful. That has to stop, and I hope that, common sense prevails. And I think that if the government's clever, they'll see that there's a revenue stream. And again, it'll come back to money, but they'll see that there's a revenue stream in this. Actually, if we allow businesses to create medical products, if we allow that to happen in the UK, where businesses will thrive, where the economy will thrive, where taxes will be paid, where jobs will be available, that's what they need to cotton onto that quickly, because that will happen, and then safe access will be available through the NHS, hopefully.
Hopefully, and I just want to wish you the best of luck, Hannah, with the rest of your campaign moving forward. Hannah, I just wanted to quickly move on to your current role then at Life Group. I know we've touched on how medicinal cannabis and the use of CBD can help epilepsy, but through your time at Life Group, have you found many other medical conditions that can benefit from the use of medicinal cannabis?
Oh yeah. I mean, we know that the way cannabis works is through the endocannabinoid system. That's the homeostasis regulation of the body, and that's why it can help with pain, it can help with anxiety, it can help with bowel issues, it can help with epilepsy. So yeah, absolutely. There's we have really good legislation in the UK actually, if it was just to be used, that a consultant can prescribe for anything. I think that's the big problem though. We need GPs to be prescribing, because actually the symptoms that cannabis helps the most, things like sleep, insomnia, pain, they're overarching symptoms. They're not consultant, they're not consultant issues. So a lot of these people with all these symptoms, epilepsy is a consultant issue, but most other symptoms like pain and sleep problems and anxiety, which is what cannabis as a medicine is used for mostly, are sort of overarching symptoms of lots of different issues. So it's very difficult for a consultant to prescribe under those symptoms, which is why I think GPs should be prescribing actually, and that I think that'll open things up if they're allowed to in the NHS.
Well, hopefully. I mean, doctors in the NHS only learn what they've been taught at medical school. So if they're not being taught anything about the health benefits of medicinal cannabis whilst at medical school, then they're not going to know anything about it when they're in their professional career. And I think any patient nowadays coming to them and saying, I'd like to try cannabis, because there's such a huge stigma attached with cannabis at the moment, they're not going to take it seriously. And I think that's why the work you guys are doing is so important, because you're actually highlighting how this can actually help people and what the benefits of using CBD and medicinal cannabis are for people. So when people are moving forward, or young doctors are going into universities and medical school to learn about the best medication out there moving forward, hopefully CBD and medicinal cannabis will be a part of that.
I think for me, really importantly, there should be training within medical school on the endocannabinoid system. I know Drug Science, for example, which is an amazing charity that I'm patron of, they are setting up an education programme for junior doctors and for medical students in the endocannabinoid system. It's not difficult to do, and it needs to be done, because actually it's going to be really enlightening for a lot of doctors, and then they'll feel confident and empowered to have those discussions with their patients, because it can't be nice as a professional to have patients coming to you knowing more about cannabis and how it works than you do. I mean, that's not good enough.
You
it's
feel
really
a bit
not good
insulted
enough.
if someone's trying to tell you how to do your job.
Exactly, and I can imagine it does feel insulting. So we need to be empowering doctors, and I don't think doctors should be forced to prescribe cannabis. Absolutely not. They should prescribe what they think is right for their patients, but they should have the ability to do it if they want to. And the way they can do that is by being empowered through education. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, lastly, just before I let you go, Hannah, where can our audience find you and follow you online if they were looking to help your support and your cause moving forward?
I've set up a consultancy business with Professor Mike Barnes called mapletreeconsultancy.co.uk, and that is to help build a UK sector. I feel very strongly about that. We want to see NHS prescriptions provided by UK companies, provided by a UK workforce, that will bring tax into the economy and everything like that. So we're doing that, helping startups. I'm on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is HanSeizureMum. I'm on Facebook, and that's Alfie's Hope on Facebook, so you can follow me on that. And I do quite a lot of social media. I'm on Instagram, Alfie's Hope on Instagram as well.
Excellent, thank you. And to any of our audience and listeners out there today who have a similar story to share, or are going through a similar situation to that of Hannah, please do reach out to her on her social media handles. Share that story with her and help her drive her cause forward. That'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, please do. And we also have a Facebook page called MedCan Support. And on there's lots and lots of families going through the same thing with very poorly children, all trying to get medical cannabis on the NHS, but mostly using private prescriptions at the moment. If people want that support. And that's one thing that I didn't have, is that I felt like I was the only mother in the whole world with a child with epilepsy. I knew I wasn't, but I didn't know anyone with an epileptic child, and through this journey I've created the most amazing lifelong friends who have children with epilepsy, and it really helps to know that we're all in the same crap boat sometimes.
Well, it's definitely helpful to share, that's for sure. But for anyone who's in a similar boat and feel they're going through a hard time, it's just helpful to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. I mean, you can't... Exactly. I mean, to be honest, we're not going to make each other feel better, really, because we're all struggling some days, but it helps to know that we're all struggling some days, put it that way, yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you for joining me today, Hannah, and sharing your story, not just with myself, but with our audience as well. I hope this makes a difference with your cause moving forwards, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thanks.